And I believe it is just like what we talked about. They're just going to ask you edges and such things like that. Let's break down the definition of a prism. The book says a prism is a three-dimensional solid with two congruent bases. Three-dimensional solid with two congruent bases. Okay, which just simply means this. Okay, when it meant two congruent bases, that just means if you're starting off with a, let's say, a pentagon, and that's your base, you have two exact pentagons. And I'll do the best I can with an exact pentagons. That probably wasn't the best start. Still not the best start. Draw another pentagon just like it over here. Okay, and then you just connect the corresponding corners. This back here is a dash line. This would be a dash line. I think that's all the dash lines. And when they talk about the bases, when you talk about the bases of prisms, okay, a lot of times when we think of something, a base of something, we think about what it's setting on. That's not the case with prisms. I have my own theory about prisms and things like that that I use, and I call it a base. When you talk about a base, I always use the old loaf of bread theory. Loaf of bread. Which means this, I'm sure some of you actually eat toast at some point in your life, and you know what a piece of toast looks like. Okay, if you're trying to figure out what the base on a shape is, the base of a shape is if it was a loaf of bread, how would you cut it? What shape would you cut it in so that every piece of toast would be exactly the same? Okay, in other words, if this was my loaf of bread and I were to cut it, what would I do? I would slice it just like this, and every shape would be this pentagonal shape, and you get all those. If I cut it a different way, for example, if I took my knife and I slashed it like and cut it like through here and through here and through here, what kind of shapes would I keep getting? I'd get rectangles, and they'd get bigger and smaller as I went up because it'd get really wide right here at this point here, but it'd get really small down here at the bottom. So that is not the base. The base is always the shape that if you cut it into a loaf of bread, you'd always get. Another example would be this. Sometimes I draw it like this. You know, I could draw a triangle here and a triangle here and connect my points. Okay. And this is a triangular prism. And again, if it was a loaf of bread, it's a little hard to see because I've got to draw it in the way, but here is one face. Maybe here is another face.
Did that get recorded? Who's Moss?
You'd have this face here, and then there's the top. Again, if that was a loaf of bread, you'd have to slice it in triangular shapes. That would give you all triangles. If you cut it like this, you'd get rectangles, and then down here at the end, you get a really sliver of a rectangle. You wouldn't want to cut it that way. But if you remember, when we talked about prisms, we talked about vertices and faces and edges, I believe. What was a vertice? Or a vertex is a singular. Yeah, vertexes and vertices are the points. So if I was talking about this pentagonal prism, how many little points do you see? Well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 there. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 there. So this thing has 10 vertices. What were faces? Faces is another highfalutin name for just the side. So if you're talking about faces, Sometimes it's hard to keep track, some of them have so many sides. You know you've got this side here, and you've got the side here that's just like it in the back. And then how many sides make up the things that surround those two bases? What do you think? There's one right here, one right there, one back there, one back there,
7.
one back there. There's only 5.
Oh, yeah.
Each one of these is gonna have its own side. Side, 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 side. So total, there are 7 total sides.
Oh, yeah.
5 that go around and the 2 bases. So this has 7 sides. How many sides does this shape have?
5.
Yeah, this would have 5 bases. And then the other thing we talked about were the edges. And if you remember, edges were the corners, not the points, but the corners. For example, on this shape here, 1 edge, 2 edge, 3 edges, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and this one that you can't see. So it has 9 edges. How many edges would our kind of destroyed pentagonal prism have? Yeah, you got 5 right here, 5 back here, 5 going around the side. It's going to have 15 edges. 15 edges there. Take a look at page 582, please. Because they do ask you a couple more complex questions.